The world has a way of testing us. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for us to be ready, and it certainly doesn't follow the timeline we set for ourselves. The test comes when it comes. Sometimes it's in the form of disappointment. Sometimes it's in the form of rejection. Sometimes it's failure, heartbreak, loss, or unexpected change. The test isn't scheduled in our calendar. It arrives unannounced, and it forces us to respond. That is the reality of life, whether we like it or not. The world will test everyone. No one is exempt. But here's the thing: the world isn't testing us to destroy us. It's not plotting against us. It's simply revealing whether we are ready for the responsibilities, the opportunities, and the challenges we say we want. It's like a coach who doesn't play favorites. Everyone gets pushed, everyone gets stretched, everyone gets uncomfortable. The difference between those who rise and those who break isn't in the weight of the challenge, but in the strength of the mind carrying it. When people say life is unfair, I understand what they mean. It feels unfair when you've worked hard for something and you don't get the outcome you expected. It feels unfair when someone less experienced than you gets the promotion. It feels unfair when illness strikes someone you love. But if we take a closer look, life isn't so much unfair as it is impartial. The rules apply to everyone. Nobody gets a pass from hardship. The richest people in the world still experience loneliness. The most powerful leaders still experience fear. The most successful athletes still experience failure. The world is testing them just as it tests you and me. And that's the first lesson. We're not singled out. The test you're going through may feel personal, but it's not unique. It's part of being human. The question isn't, why me? The real question is, why not me? Because if the world tests everyone, then why should you or I be an exception? That shift in mindset alone takes us from feeling like victims of life to becoming participants in the process of growth. I remember speaking to someone who had lost everything in a business venture. They poured years of work, their savings, their reputation into an idea that ultimately didn't survive. They felt betrayed by the world, convinced that life had specifically chosen them to punish. And yet when we zoomed out, their story was not unique. Every successful entrepreneur, every innovator, every leader has stories of failure just as brutal, some even worse. The difference was that those who made it saw failure not as the end, but as the test. And when you recognize that the world tests everyone, failure stops being evidence of your weakness and starts being evidence that you're in the game. Think about it this way: when steel is being forged, it has to pass through fire. It's the heat and the hammering that strengthen it. Without the fire, it remains brittle. The test is the very thing that makes it unbreakable. The same applies to us. Without the setbacks, the disappointments, the difficult seasons, our minds never develop the resilience to handle greater responsibility. We might want the reward, but if we can't endure the test, the reward will crush us anyway. The world tests us because it must. If every dream came easy, if every goal was achieved without friction, if every effort was rewarded instantly, then none of us would ever grow. We'd be weak, entitled, and fragile. The test is not the punishment, it's the preparation. The world isn't asking, are you comfortable? It's asking, are you ready? But the problem is, most of us misunderstand the purpose of these tests. We think the test is about winning or losing. We think it's about proving our worth to others. We think it's about achieving perfection. It's not. The test is not designed to measure whether you succeed. It's designed to measure whether you persist. The people who build resilient lives aren't the ones who never fail. They're the ones who never quit. The world doesn't break people because they failed. It breaks people because they convinced themselves failure was the end. They stopped showing up. They stopped trying. They let the test define them instead of refine them. And that's the danger. If you don't toughen your mind to understand the nature of life's tests, you'll misinterpret every hardship as a personal curse when in reality, it's the very training ground you need. We all have moments where we look at someone else and think they've got it easy. We see their highlight reel and assume they've somehow escaped the tests of life. But behind every polished success story is a messy backstory filled with battles we'll never see. The world tested them too. Maybe harder than it's testing you right now. What separates them is that they allowed the tests to shape them instead of shatter them. If the world tests everyone, then the goal shouldn't be to avoid the test. The goal should be to prepare for it. You prepare by building resilience in small ways. You prepare by doing difficult things on purpose, by leaning into discomfort instead of running from it. You prepare by reminding yourself daily that hardship is not the enemy, but the ally of growth. When the big test comes, and you won't be caught off guard, you'll be ready to stand. Let's be clear, the world will test your patience. It will test your integrity. It will test your ability to stay calm under pressure. It will test your willingness to sacrifice. And it will test your belief in yourself when everyone else doubts you. These are not accidents. They are the curriculum of life. Every test you face today is shaping you for the challenges of tomorrow. If you fail today, it doesn't mean you're unworthy. It just means you've discovered where you need to grow stronger. This is why toughening your mind is non-negotiable, because the world doesn't care how smart you are, how connected you are if your mind is weak. A weak mind will crumble under pressure. A weak mind will sabotage opportunities. A weak mind will give up before the breakthrough. But a strong mind, trained to see the test for what it is, becomes unbreakable. So when you face your next challenge, instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Ask, what is this preparing me for? That single question transforms the test from a curse into a classroom. You stop fighting against the process and start working with it. You stop resenting the struggle and start respecting it. You stop feeling like life is unfair and start realizing that life is giving you exactly what you need to grow. Remember this, the world tests everyone. It doesn't matter who you are, what you have, or where you come from. Your tests may look different from mine, but the purpose is the same. The only choice you have is whether you let the test break you or build you. And that choice is made not in the moment of the test itself, but in the daily decision to toughen your mind. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, you're preparing. Every time you choose persistence over quitting, you're preparing. Every time you choose growth over excuses, you're preparing. So that when the world throws its inevitable tests your way, you'll not only survive them, you'll use them to rise. Because in the end, the test isn't about proving to the world what you're capable of. It's about proving it to yourself. And once you've done that, there's nothing left for the world to break. A glass looks strong until it hits the floor. From a distance, it holds its shape, it carries water, it appears reliable. But when pressure comes from the outside, when it slips, when gravity takes hold, it shatters. The truth is, many of us walk around with minds like glass. They look fine on the outside. They can carry the weight of small challenges. They can look impressive in moments of calm. But when pressure comes, when the unexpected hits, they break into pieces. That is the danger of a soft mind. It may look strong, but it is fragile. And life doesn't care how good you looked when things were easy. Life cares about what happens when pressure shows up. Because pressure will always show up. It comes in the form of deadlines, disappointments, betrayals, failures, criticism, and setbacks. And when it comes, it exposes the true strength of your mind. A soft mind is one that avoids discomfort. It wants life to be smooth. It wants to be liked by everyone. It wants certainty before taking risks. It avoids criticism. It hides from failure. It chooses comfort over growth. And on the surface, that feels safe. Who wouldn't want to stay away from pain? But the cost of avoiding pain is fragility. And fragility has no place in a world that is constantly applying pressure. Think of a seed planted in soil. If you give it no resistance, no wind, no rain, no pressure, it grows weak. Its roots don't dig deep. The first storm that comes knocks it over. But a seed that grows against resistance, that pushes through soil, that faces wind, that bends under storms and keeps rising, it develops roots that hold it firm. The difference is in the pressure. The same is true of us. Pressure either breaks us or builds us, and the deciding factor is whether we allow our minds to remain soft. The irony is most people want strength without struggle. They want resilience without resistance. They want courage without fear. But you can't build any of those qualities without pressure. Just like muscles only grow when they are torn and repaired, the mind only grows when it faces stress and learns to adapt. A soft mind, one that's never tested, will always crumble. I once spoke with a young professional who was brilliant on paper, top of their class, flawless credentials, polished interviews. They had been praised their whole life for their intelligence. But the first time they encountered a boss who criticized their work harshly, they shut down. They started doubting themselves. They considered quitting. Not because they lacked talent, but because their mind had been protected for too long. They had built no tolerance for pressure. Their brilliance couldn't save them because brilliance is not the same as resilience. And resilience is what the world demands. This is why we must toughen our minds deliberately. Because when we don't, pressure exposes us, and once exposed, the world doesn't stop to give us time to rebuild. It keeps moving. Opportunities pass. Trust erodes. Confidence shatters. A soft mind cannot carry the weight of responsibility, leadership, or even personal dreams. It will always find excuses. It will always retreat. The danger of a soft mind isn't just in breaking under external pressure. It's also in the way it magnifies pressure internally. When the mind is soft, every small challenge feels like a big one. Every slight criticism feels like an attack. Every delay feels like failure. Every obstacle feels impossible. The world doesn't have to be cruel to break a soft mind. It crumbles under things that a strong mind would barely notice. Pressure itself isn't the enemy. In fact, pressure is neutral. What determines whether pressure breaks or builds you is your preparation. If your mind is trained to handle it, pressure sharpens you. If your mind is untrained, pressure crushes you. That is why mental toughness is not optional. It's the foundation on which everything else depends. The way we think about pressure needs to change. Most people see it as a threat. They avoid it at all costs. But what if we started seeing pressure as feedback? What if we started seeing it as an invitation? Because that's what it really is. Pressure tells you where you're strong and where you're fragile. It shows you the areas that need attention. It tells you, here is the part of you that isn't ready yet. And if you use that information wisely, you grow stronger. Think about an athlete in training. The coach doesn't reduce the weight, so the athlete feels comfortable. The coach increases the weight, so the athlete grows stronger. The pressure of the weight is what builds the muscle. Without it, there is no progress. The world works the same way. It doesn't reduce the weight of responsibility just because you're not ready. It applies pressure, and in that pressure, you discover whether your mind is soft or strong. Some people hear this and think strength means being hard, being unfeeling, being cold. But that's not true strength. Toughness doesn't mean ignoring emotions. It doesn't mean pretending nothing hurts. A strong mind still feels pressure, still experiences doubt, still knows fear. The difference is it doesn't collapse under them. It acknowledges them, then keeps moving forward. A soft mind sees fear as a stop sign. A strong mind sees fear as a signal that growth is near. Let's look at leaders who inspire us. The reason they stand out is not because life spared them from pressure. Quite the opposite. They became leaders because pressure revealed their strength. When the world was chaotic, they stayed calm. When others panicked, they looked for solutions. When setbacks came, they didn't shatter, they adapted. Pressure didn't break them because they had prepared their minds to withstand it. That is what leadership is at its core. The ability to remain steady when the weight of the world is on your shoulders. And here's something important. Toughness is not built in grand moments. It's built in small, everyday choices. Every time you choose to do the hard thing instead of the easy thing, you're toughening your mind. Every time you choose honesty over comfort, discipline over laziness, persistence over excuses, you're preparing your mind for pressure. Because when the big moment comes, you won't rise to the occasion, you'll fall to the level of your training. If your mind has been trained to take the easy path, pressure will break you. If your mind has been trained to embrace challenge, pressure will sharpen you. The world today offers endless ways to soften our minds. We live in a culture of convenience where comfort is sold as the highest good. Instant gratification is available in every direction. We can avoid discomfort with a swipe of a screen. And while that may feel pleasant, it quietly erodes our ability to handle real pressure. Because the real world does not bend to our convenience. The real world does not move at the speed of our apps. The real world doesn't delete discomfort with a click. The real world applies pressure, whether we like it or not. And when that moment comes, the question is, have we built a mind that can endure? The strongest people are not the ones who avoided pressure. They are the ones who leaned into it. They are the ones who treated every challenge as a chance to build inner strength. They are the ones who understood that a soft mind cannot carry a hard life. And life, by definition, will always be hard. So when you feel pressure, instead of shrinking from it, lean into it. Ask yourself, what is this teaching me? What part of me needs to grow stronger here? What lesson is hidden inside this challenge? Because every ounce of pressure you endure today makes you more capable of handling tomorrow. And over time, the very pressures that once threatened to break you will become the forces that shaped you. A soft mind breaks under pressure. But a toughened mind, it bends without breaking, it adapts. It learns. It endures, and eventually it thrives. That's the invitation life gives to all of us. Toughen your mind, or the world will break it. And if you accept that invitation, you'll discover that no amount of pressure, not from failure, not from fear, not from circumstance, has the power to shatter you. People often look at those who endure hardship with grace, those who seem unshaken when everything falls apart, and they assume resilience is something those people were born with. They assume strength is genetic, that some people simply came into this world with thicker skin, with tougher hearts, with minds like stone. But resilience isn't a birthright. It's not something given to a select few. It's built. It's earned. It's forged over time through experience, through failure, through getting up one more time than you've been knocked down. We like to believe in the myth of the naturally strong person because it excuses us from the responsibility of building resilience ourselves. If strength is something people are born with, then we don't have to try. If resilience is a gift, then we don't have to put in the work. But the truth is much more uncomfortable and much more empowering at the same time. Resilience is a choice, a daily choice, a discipline, a practice. Think of a child learning to walk. No child takes their first step and then runs a marathon the next day. They wobble, they fall, they cry. And yet they get up again over and over. They don't interpret falling as failure. They don't see it as proof they're not meant to walk. They see it as part of the process. Falling isn't the opposite of walking. It's how walking is learned. That is resilience in its purest form. Not giving up, not assuming the struggle is the end, but seeing struggle as the necessary path to strength. The same principle applies throughout life. Resilience is built every time you face discomfort and choose not to run. It's built when you fail at something important and decide to try again anyway. It's built when you don't let one rejection define your worth. Every setback becomes a brick in the foundation of resilience. And the more bricks you lay, the stronger you become. But notice something important. Resilience is not built in moments of comfort. It's built in moments of challenge. Nobody grows tougher from getting everything they want. Nobody grows stronger from being praised all the time. Nobody develops endurance from only taking easy roads. It's the hard roads, the uncertain journeys, the losses and the heartbreaks that build the muscles of the mind and heart. I once met someone who had been through years of adversity, financial struggles, family challenges, career disappointments. On the outside, it looked like life had been unusually cruel to them. And yet, when you spoke with them, you didn't sense bitterness or defeat. You sensed wisdom, you sensed depth, you sensed strength that couldn't be shaken. They weren't born that way. Life didn't hand them resilience at birth, it handed them trials, and they turned those trials into strength. They built resilience one difficult experience at a time. Contrast that with someone who has avoided difficulty their whole life, someone shielded from struggle, always protected from failure, always handed an easier path. The moment real hardship shows up, they collapse. They have no frame of reference, no muscle memory for adversity. Their mind is fragile because it's never been tested. This is the danger of seeking only comfort. It denies us the very opportunities we need to build resilience. Resilience doesn't mean you don't feel pain. It doesn't mean you don't get tired, frustrated, or even hopeless at times. It means you don't stop moving forward. It means you've learned that pain is not permanent, that failure is not final, that setbacks are not the end. Resilience is the ability to bend without breaking, to stumble without staying down, to acknowledge the weight of the world without letting it crush you. We admire resilient people not because they avoid hardship, but because they endure it with courage. And if they can, so can you. Because nothing about resilience is magical. Nothing about resilience is unattainable. It's built through choices, small choices repeated daily that toughen your mind and expand your capacity to handle more. The problem is, most of us are waiting for resilience to appear when we need it most. We wait for the crisis, for the emergency, for the tragedy, and then we hope resilience will suddenly show up. But that's not how it works. Resilience is not something you summon in the moment of crisis. It's something you've prepared long before the crisis arrives. It's like saving money. You don't start saving the day the emergency hits. You build savings over time so you're ready when the emergency comes. Resilience works the same way. Every time you choose discipline, every time you lean into discomfort, every time you take responsibility instead of making excuses, you're depositing into your resilience account. And when life makes a withdrawal, you have the reserves to endure. There's another myth about resilience, that it means going through everything alone. That to be resilient is to be independent, self-sufficient, unshakable in solitude. But true resilience isn't built in isolation. It's built in community. It's built in relationships. It's built when people lean on each other, when they draw strength from one another. A resilient person knows they don't have to carry the weight of the world by themselves. They know resilience is not just inner strength, but also the humility to ask for help, the courage to be vulnerable, and the wisdom to surround themselves with people who lift them up. Every resilient person you admire has a story of others who supported them, encouraged them, believed in them when they didn't believe in themselves. Resilience is built in the push and pull of relationships just as much as it's built in individual struggle. That's why building resilience is not only about training your mind, but also about choosing the right people to walk with you. Think of history's greatest breakthroughs, the moments when humanity advanced despite impossible odds. Whether it was civil rights, scientific discovery, or rebuilding after wars, none of it happened because individuals were born resilient. It happened because ordinary people faced extraordinary challenges and chose to endure together. Resilience is not a superpower. It's a collective strength built by human beings refusing to give up, one step at a time. So how do we build it? Not by waiting for life to get easier, not by hoping for a smoother path. We build resilience by facing life as it is, by choosing to see obstacles as teachers, by choosing to get up every time we fall, by reminding ourselves that hardship is not a punishment, but a preparation. And by practicing resilience in small things every single day, taking on a challenge, finishing what we start, keeping promises to ourselves, refusing to run from discomfort. When you look at someone who seems unbreakable, understand this: they were broken before, many times. They've failed, they've cried, they've doubted themselves. But every time they chose to rise again. That's how resilience is built. Not by avoiding the breaking, but by learning how to rebuild stronger after every break. The beautiful thing about resilience being built, not born, is that it means every single one of us has access to it. It's not reserved for the lucky. It's not reserved for the gifted. It's available to anyone willing to do the work, anyone willing to face the tests, anyone willing to keep moving forward when it would be easier to quit. One day, life will test you in ways you can't imagine. It will take things you thought you couldn't live without. It will shake the ground beneath you. It will leave you questioning who you are and what you're capable of. And in that moment, you will discover whether or not you've built resilience. If you haven't, the world will break you. If you have, you'll bend, you'll stagger, but you will stand. And in standing, you will become stronger than you ever believed possible. Resilience is not born, it is built, brick by brick, choice by choice, struggle by struggle. And if you are willing to build it, nothing the world throws at you will ever be enough to break you. Two people can face the same problem and walk away with completely different outcomes. One will see it as the end, while the other will see it as the beginning. One will interpret it as a punishment, while the other will interpret it as preparation. One will feel powerless, while the other will find strength they didn't know they had. The difference isn't in the problem. The difference is in perspective. Perspective is the lens through which we see the world, and that lens shapes everything. Our choices, our resilience, our attitude, our results. Change the lens and you change the story. That's why your perspective is not just how you see the world. It's the very thing that shapes your power within it. We often think of power as external, resources, authority, influence, money, status. But power really begins in the mind. It begins with the story you tell yourself about what's happening to you. If your story is that life is against you, you'll live small, hesitant, fearful. If your story is that life is for you, even when it hurts, you'll step forward with courage, curiosity, and determination. A storm is a storm. It doesn't choose who to hit. But one sailor curses the storm and lets the waves dictate his direction. Another sailor uses the wind to adjust his sails and move closer to his destination. Same storm, different perspective. And that difference decides who grows stronger and who is crushed. There's a well-known truth about diamonds. They're nothing more than carbon under pressure. But here's the catch. Carbon can also become coal under pressure. What determines the outcome? The environment, the process, the perspective applied to that transformation. Two identical elements, two radically different results. The same is true of us. We can go through the pressure of life and come out bitter, hardened, broken. Or we can go through the same pressure and come out stronger, sharper, more valuable. The pressure itself is not the deciding factor. Perspective is. I once met a man who lost his job after 20 years at the same company. For weeks, he described it as the worst thing that ever happened to him. He felt betrayed, humiliated, terrified. From that perspective, his energy collapsed, his relationship suffered, his confidence eroded. He stopped looking forward and he started living backward, replaying his loss over and over again. But then something shifted. He began asking himself a different question. What if this isn't the end? What if it's the beginning? That shift in perspective opened a new path. He pursued a passion he had ignored for decades. Within 2 years, he had built something new, something fulfilling, same event, same loss, different story, different future. That's what perspective does. It doesn't erase the hardship. It doesn't undo the pain. It doesn't magically solve the problem. But it reframes the meaning of the hardship, and in reframing it unlocks power. Because power isn't the absence of difficulty. Power is the ability to move forward despite it. When we're children, we're not told this. We're told life is about winning and losing, success and failure, good and bad. But life is rarely that black and white. What looks like failure today may be the very thing that sets you up for success tomorrow. What feels like rejection in this season may be redirection towards something better in the next. The problem is not the event. The problem is how we label it. And once we label it, that label becomes our reality. Perspective shapes whether we see criticism as an attack or as feedback. Perspective shapes whether we see waiting as wasted time or as preparation time. Perspective shapes whether we see obstacles as barriers or as stepping stones. And because perspective shapes those interpretations, it shapes the choices we make. Those choices shape our habits, and those habits shape our destiny. It all begins with how we choose to see. There's a phrase that says, change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change. At first, it sounds like wordplay, but it's true. If you see a challenge as impossible, you won't even attempt it, and it will remain impossible. If you see it as an opportunity, you'll take steps forward, and in doing so, you'll discover solutions you couldn't see before. The challenge hasn't changed, you have, and because you have, everything about the outcome changes. Perspective is not automatic. It must be trained. Left unchecked, the mind defaults to fear, to negativity, to seeing threats everywhere. That's survival mode. And while survival mode is useful in emergencies, it's not useful as a way of life. Thriving requires a different perspective. Thriving requires training the mind to ask better questions, to look for meaning in pain, to search for growth in failure, to see possibility in uncertainty. I remember a story of a soldier who returned from battle deeply wounded, not just physically, but emotionally. For months he replayed the trauma. He saw himself as broken, as useless, as someone who had lost his future. But then he encountered others who had walked the same path and chosen a different perspective. They weren't defined by their wounds, they were defined by their resilience. That shift inspired him. He began to see his scars not as evidence of weakness, but as proof of survival. That new perspective gave him power, not the power to erase the past, but the power to build a future in spite of it. The truth is, life doesn't promise us control. We can't control when storms come. We can't control when people betray us. We can't control when opportunities close or when failures arrive. But we can control perspective. That's our freedom. That's our responsibility. That's our power. It's tempting to believe perspective is naive optimism, a way of sugarcoating reality. But real perspective is not about ignoring the truth. It's about expanding it. It's about holding pain and possibility in the same hand. It's about saying, yes, this is hard, and yes, something good can come from it. It's about seeing the whole picture, not just the darkest corner of it. That's not naivety, that's wisdom. So the question is, how do you shape your perspective in a way that gives you power? You start with awareness. You start by noticing the story you tell yourself about what's happening. When you fail, do you tell yourself you're not good enough? Or do you tell yourself you've just discovered a way that doesn't work? When you're criticized, do you tell yourself you're worthless? Or do you tell yourself you've just been handed feedback to grow stronger? Those stories aren't written by the world, they're written by you. And because you wrote them, you can rewrite them. That doesn't mean every story is easy to rewrite. It doesn't mean you won't need time to process pain, to grieve loss, to face disappointment. But it does mean that at some point you have a choice. Do you stay trapped in the old perspective, or do you choose a new one that unlocks power? Leaders understand this. The ones who inspire us don't have easier lives than we do. They simply interpret their challenges differently. They see pressure as opportunity. They see failure as feedback. They see setbacks as stepping stones. Their perspective fuels their ability to stay calm, to adapt, to keep moving when others freeze. And because of that, they carry power that isn't dependent on circumstances. Imagine for a moment if you shifted your perspective in your own life. What if instead of seeing obstacles as proof you should stop, you saw them as proof you're on the right path? What if instead of seeing discomfort as a signal of danger, you saw it as a signal of growth? What if instead of seeing uncertainty as something to fear, you saw it as space for creativity? The events of your life wouldn't change, but your experience of them would transform completely. Perspective is a difference between living as a victim and living as a victor. It's the difference between collapsing under pressure and rising because of it. It's the difference between being powerless in the face of hardship and being powerful in the midst of it. That power doesn't come from outside, it comes from within. And it begins with the lens you choose to look through. So the next time you face a challenge, and there will be a next time, pause before you react. Ask yourself, how am I choosing to see this? What story am I telling myself about what this means? Because in that story lies your power or your weakness. Choose wisely. Because when your perspective shifts, your entire future shifts with it. Leadership is a word that gets thrown around easily. We use it to describe people with titles, people with authority, people who stand at the front of a room or at the top of an organization. But leadership isn't about position. It's not about titles. It's not about power over others. Real leadership begins much earlier in a place most people overlook. It starts inside. It starts with inner strength. Because if you cannot lead yourself, you cannot lead anyone else. Inner strength is not loud. It's not about commanding attention or making grand speeches. It's not about never showing weakness. Inner strength is quieter, steadier. It is the ability to stay grounded when everything around you shakes. It is the ability to make choices guided by values rather than by fear. It is the ability to carry yourself with consistency when circumstances are inconsistent. Without that foundation, any form of leadership will eventually collapse. Think about a tree. The strength of the tree is not measured by how tall it stands on a sunny day. It is measured by how firmly its roots hold when the storm comes. Leadership works the same way. Outer influence may look impressive for a while, but when pressure arrives, and it always does, only the leaders with deep inner roots remain standing. Those roots are built from integrity, resilience, and self-discipline. That is inner strength. We've all seen what happens when leadership is built without inner strength. The cracks eventually show. Under pressure, decisions become erratic. Under criticism, confidence crumbles. Under temptation, integrity falters. And when leaders fall, they don't fall alone, they take people with them. Teams suffer. Families suffer. Communities suffer. That's why inner strength is not a luxury in leadership, it's a responsibility. There's a story of an airline pilot who faced a catastrophic failure mid-flight. Engines down, alarms blaring, panic everywhere. The passengers didn't see the mechanics of the plane. They didn't understand the technical systems. What they saw was the calmness of the pilot, his voice steady, his instructions clear, his presence composed. That calmness didn't come from the absence of fear. It came from inner strength. And because of that, hundreds of people lived. That's leadership, not because he had authority, but because his inner strength created stability for everyone else in chaos. Leadership starts with mastering yourself. That means mastering your emotions, because if anger controls you, fear controls you, or ego controls you, then you are not leading, you are reacting. And no one trusts a leader who is always reacting. People follow steadiness. They follow those who, even when shaken, do not collapse. That steadiness only comes from inner strength. Inner strength is built through discipline. The discipline to do what is right even when it's unpopular. The discipline to stick to principles even when shortcuts tempt you. The discipline to keep promises, not just to others, but to yourself. If you cannot trust yourself, why should anyone else trust you? If you cannot keep your own commitments, how can you expect others to keep theirs? Leadership starts with the smallest form of leadership, leading yourself. I once spoke to a young manager who struggled with gaining respect from their team. They thought leadership was about demanding loyalty, giving orders, making their presence felt. But the harder they tried, the less their team listened. It wasn't until they shifted focus inward, showing up, consistently admitting mistakes, staying calm in crisis, treating people with respect, that their team began to follow willingly. Respect didn't come from authority. It came from inner strength being visible in their actions. The truth is, people don't follow titles. They follow example. They follow character. They follow someone who embodies the values they themselves aspire to live by. And those values are not proven in easy times. They are proven when pressure mounts, when sacrifices are required, when everything is on the line. That's when inner strength matters most. Leaders who lack inner strength may rise quickly, but they don't last. Leaders who possess inner strength may take longer to be noticed, but when they rise, they endure. Because their power doesn't come from circumstance, it comes from within. Circumstances change, inner strength remains. Inner strength also shapes how leaders treat others. A leader who is insecure lashes out. A leader who is controlled by ego diminishes others to feel taller. A leader who is weak inside manipulates, deceives, or blames. But a leader with inner strength, they lift others, they encourage. They take responsibility when things go wrong and give credit when things go right. They don't need to steal the spotlight because their confidence doesn't depend on it. They don't need to control people because their authority comes from trust, not fear. We often admire great leaders for their achievements, but what really makes them great is the unseen inner work. The nights they wrestled with doubt but chose courage anyway. The moments they wanted to quit but kept showing up. The temptations they resisted when nobody was watching. Those invisible battles create visible impact. Without those battles, leadership is shallow. With them, leadership becomes unshakable. Building inner strength doesn't happen overnight. Just like resilience, it is built daily. It's built in the small choices you make when no one is looking. Do you cut corners or do you hold yourself to a higher standard? Do you give in to excuses or do you hold yourself accountable? Do you let emotions control you or do you learn to pause, breathe, and respond with clarity? Each of those choices is a brick. Over time, those bricks build the foundation of inner strength. And here's the paradox: the stronger you are inside, the gentler you can be outside. Weak leaders hide behind harshness. They use fear to mask insecurity. Strong leaders, the ones with true inner strength, don't need to shout, intimidate, or dominate. They can lead with kindness, with patience, with empathy, because their strength gives them the freedom to do so. They are not threatened by others. They are not desperate to prove themselves. They know who they are, and that allows others to be who they are too. One of the most powerful things a leader can say is, "I don't know." It takes inner strength to admit uncertainty. It takes inner strength to ask for help. It takes inner strength to own mistakes. Weakness hides behind pretense. Strength stands in truth. And when people see that in a leader, they trust them more, not less. Because inner strength isn't about being flawless. It's about being authentic and consistent. Leadership also requires endurance. There will be seasons where everything feels heavy, where results are slow, where criticism is loud. A leader without inner strength burns out quickly. They run out of fuel, they give up or lash out. But a leader with inner strength endures. They understand that the journey is long, that setbacks are part of progress, that criticism is part of visibility. They don't let the weight of today steal the vision of tomorrow. That endurance doesn't come from external motivation. It comes from deep wells of strength built over years of preparation. So, what does this mean for each of us? It means leadership is not something you wait to be given. It's something you build from the inside out. It means before you ask others to follow you, you must first ask, would I follow myself? Would I trust myself if I were watching my own actions? Would I believe in myself if I were in the shoes of those I hope to lead? Those questions are uncomfortable, but they reveal the truth, because the quality of your leadership will never rise above the quality of your inner strength. The world is hungry for leaders, real leaders. Not ones with titles or positions, but ones with integrity, humility, and courage. Leaders who can stand strong when everything else shakes. Leaders whose inner strength gives others the confidence to move forward. And that kind of leadership is not out of reach. It begins with the daily choice to lead yourself well, to stay true to your values, to discipline your mind, to master your emotions, to remain steady in storms. Leadership starts with inner strength. Without it, influence collapses under pressure. With it, influence grows even in the hardest times. Build it daily, protect it fiercely, live it consistently. And when the world looks for someone to trust, to follow, to believe in, your inner strength will speak louder than any title ever could.